Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time, and I'm not going to lie, this trip isn't a luxury vacation. We're heading to 17th century New England, a place of profound faith, stark simplicity, and a social fabric so tight it might feel a little constricting. Imagine landing in a world where your every move is noted, every word weighed, and gossip isn't just rude, it's a matter for public record. Honestly, you'd probably get in trouble on day one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and drop a comment below with your city and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't a sight, but a feeling. They do. Bone minus, soaking cold, that a modern jacket is utterly unprepared for. You open your eyes, and the world is painted in shades of brown and grey. Halo, heavy sky presses down on a landscape of mud and stubborn, leafless trees. The air smells of damp earth, wood smell, and something else, a faint, musky scent of livestock. You're standing on what might generously be called a road, but it's really just a wide, rutted track of thick, sucking mud. Your sneakers, so practical just moments ago, feel absurdly out of place. You look up, and there it is, your new home. It's not a city, not yet, but it's far more than a simple camp. A collection of sturdy, unpainted wooden houses stands in resolute lines. Their windows are small, dark squares, like eyes watching you without expression. Smoke curls from clay and stick chimneys. The only sign of warmth in this austere picture. There's no color, no ornamentation, just function, survival, piety. Then you see them, the people. They move with a purpose that borders on severity. The men wear dark, heavy wool coats, broad brimmed hats, and sturdy leather boots caked in the same mud you're standing in. The women are wrapped in layers of sober colored fabric, their hair hidden beneath simple coifs, their faces framed by white linen. They don't smile at you, they don't wave, they stop, they turn, they stare, and in their eyes, you see it. It's not hostility, not exactly. It's a piercing, evaluated gaze, a silent questioning. You are an anomaly. Your bright, synthetic clothing is a splash of garish color in their monochrome world. You are loud, even in your silence. This is the living, breathing heart of Puritan New England. These people crossed an ocean not for riches, but to build what their governor, John Winthrop, famously called a city upon a hill, a model society for all the world to see, a beacon of pure, uncorked faith. That's a heavy burden to carry, and it leaves little room for frivolity or strangers in strange attire. Their seriousness is their mission statement. You realize the settlement is larger than you'd be expected. This isn't just a handful of desperate survivors. There are dozens of houses, a half-finished meeting house, and the sounds of swords and hammers in the distance. This is the result of what historians call the Great Migration, a period where nearly 20 Zorro English Puritans packed up their lives and moved to this new world. They didn't just bring their faith, they brought their entire communities. This place wasn't built by lone adventurers, but by transplanted families, neighbors, and congregation. That's why the scrutiny feels so intense. You haven't just stumbled into a village, you've stumbled into someone else's meticulously planned parish. You look from one stern face to another, and a question forms in your mind. Are they all here purely for God, or did other, more earthly matters play a part? Back in England, the wool and cloth trades had been collapsing, leaving many skilled artisans and farmers in dire straits. Historians still debate the precise balance of these motivations. Was it the divine pull of creating a new Jerusalem that brought them here? Or was it also the economic push of needing to find a new way to feed their families? Looking at their hard, pragmatic faces, you suspect the answer isn't simple. It's a tangled knot of faith and finance, a reality far more complex than the simple stories often told. One of the men detaches himself from the group and begins walking towards you. He's not rushing. His steps are deliberate, measured, each footfall making a thick, squelching sound in the mud. He holds no weapon, but his gaze is more intimidating than any musket. The collective stare of the village seems to funnel through him. The welcome, it seems, is over. The questioning is about to begin. The man stops a few feet from you. His face is weathered, carved by wind and hard work, and his eyes are a pale, serious blue. He doesn't ask your name or where you came from. Questions are a luxury, and he seems to be a man who deals only in necessities. He simply gives a curt nod toward a narrow gap between two houses. The gesture is clear, follow me. You comply, your strange shoes slipping and sliding in the thick mud as you try to keep up with a sure-footed pace. He leads you not to the edge of the settlement, but right into its heart. This is intentional. You are being placed squarely in the middle of the community, where you can be observed. The houses you pass are almost identical. Timber-frame structures with steeply pitched roofs. Some are covered in rough-sawn clapboard, others with a sort of plaster mixed with straw, a technique called wattle and daub. He stops before one that is indistinguishable from the others and lifts a simple wooden latch. The door groans open on leather hinges, and he steps aside, holding it for you. You step inside, and the world changes. The bright, cold air is replaced by a thick, warm, and smoky atmosphere. It's dark. Your eyes take a moment to adjust, and the first thing you see is the fire. It's not a tidy little flame in a modern fireplace. It's a living, breathing heart of heat at the center of the home. The fireplace is enormous, a cavern of rough laid stone and clay, big enough to stand in. A large black cauldron hangs from an iron hook over the flames, bubbling slowly. This is the home's engine. It provides all the heat, all the light, and the means to cook every meal. This main room, the whole, is the entire ground floor. The ceiling is low, with massive and hewn wooden beams just above your head. The floor is made of wide, uneven wooden planks, scoured clean but still bearing the marks of daily life. There is no clutter. Against one wall is a long, rough trestle table with two simple benches. In a corner sits a large wooden chest, downed with iron strap. That's it. There are no paintings, no rugs, no comfortable chairs. Every object has a purpose. The chest is not for decoration. It's your closet, your safe, and your storage unit all in one. You notice the source of the dim, murky light. The windows are small, lattice-paned openings, but they aren't filled with glass. Glass was a staggering luxury. Instead, they're covered with heavy, oiled paper. This is a common, and surprisingly effective, little trick of the era. It keeps out the worst of the wind and rain while letting in a weak, yellowish glow, but it also completely obscures the view. You can't see out, and more importantly, no one can clearly see in, though they can certainly see your shadow moving about. And then you realize the most profound difference, the absolute lack of privacy. This one room is the kitchen, dining room, living room, and workshop. A steel, ladder-like staircase leads up to a loft, or parlor, which would serve as the master bedroom and, in a pinch, a guest room. But for most of the family, and for you, sleep would happen down here, on a straw-filled mattress, or pallet, rolled out near the dying embers of the fire each night. You will share the space with the entire family. You will hear every cough, every whispered word, every restless turn in the night. Solitude is not a concept that exists within these four walls. Your host points a calloused finger toward the hearth, then the water bucket, then a stack of firewood. No words are needed. This is your new to -2 list. A cycle of chores that never ends. Tending the fire is a constant job. If it goes out, lighting it is a difficult chore involving flint and steel, or a humbling trip to a neighbor to borrow some hot coals. The water doesn't come from a tap. It's hauled in heavy buckets from the town well. The wood doesn't arrive in neat stack. You chop it yourself. You'll spend your days cooking, mending, cleaning, churning butter, making candles from animal fat, and endless litany of labor required just to keep the household running. You're actually quite lucky. Historians still debate just how primitive the very first shelters were. Some argue that many of the initial settlers, arriving too late in the year to build proper houses, spent their first brutal winter in dugouts, essentially pits dug into hillsides, covered with roofs of sodden timber. The fact that you have a timber-framed house with a solid roof and a stone chimney means someone has already done the hardest work. You've been spared the worst of it. But, as the man gives a final, silent nod and pulls the heavy door shut behind him, leaving you alone with the crackling fire, you feel the immense weight of this new reality. The silence in the room is vast, filled only by the hiss and pop of the burning logs. This isn't just a house, it's your entire world now. The week passes in a blur of unfamiliar, back-breaking labor. Your hands, once soft, are now round calloused. Every muscle aches. You learn the rhythm of the day: rise before the sun, work until it sets, and fall into an exhausted sleep on your straw pallet. But then, a different kind of day dawns. The sun rises, but the usual frantic energy of the settlement is absent. The air is still. There's no sound of axes or saws, no clang of a blacksmith's hammer. This is the Lord's day, the Sabbath, and it is absolute. From the moment you woke up, the atmosphere in the house was different, somber. The clothes laid out for you aren't your usual work, minus worn woolens. They're the good clothes, still dark, still simple, but cleaner, less patch. Putting them on feels like putting on a uniform for a solemn duty. No unnecessary work is to be done. The meals were cooked yesterday. The water was hauled yesterday. Today is a day for God, and only for God. Even walking too briskly or laughing loudly is frowned upon. This strict observance is a core tenet of Puritanism, a deliberate rejection of what they saw as the lax and corrupt practices of the Church of England. A bell begins to toll. Its sound is clear and sharp in the cold air, a summons that cannot be ignored. The family files out of the house, and you join them. The entire settlement is moving in one direction, a slow, dark river of people flowing towards the largest building in the center of town, the meeting house. It's not a church, not in the way you might picture one. It's a plain, square, unadorned wooden building. There is no steeple, no stained glass, no crucifix. To the Puritans, such things were idolatrous distractions, popish vanity. The building's very plainness is a statement of faith. It is a place for meeting God, not for admiring architecture. You step inside, and the austerity is even more pronounced. The interior is stark white, the walls scrubbed clean. Sunlight streams in through large, clear glass windows, a sign of the building's importance, as glass was reserved for the most essential public structures. There are no pews, just rows and rows of hard, backless wooden benches. Families do not sit together. The men and boys sit on one side, the women and young girls on the other. You are guided to a spot on the women's side, squeezed between the matriarch of your host family and a young girl who keeps her eyes fixed firmly on the floor. The room fills with the entire population of the town. There are no empty seats. Attendance isn't optional. It's the law, a fashionably mundane law. In fact, fines were regularly levied for unnecessary absence from public worship. If you were ill, you might be excused, but you'd likely get a visit from the tithing man to make sure you were genuinely sick. At the front of the room is a high, imposing pulpit. This is the room's focal point. A man in a black robe, the minister, climbs its steps and looks out over his congregation. There is no choir, no organ. A man known as a pre-recent stands and begins to line out a song. He sings one line, and the congregation sings it back. The sound is raw, unharmonious, and loud. It's not about musical beauty. It's about collective praise. Then, the sermon begins, and it does not end. The minister's voice fills the room, a thunderous, passionate torrent of words. He is not here to offer comforting platitudes. He is here to dissect scripture, to expose sin, and to remind you of the very real possibility of eternal damnation. You don't have a prayer book or a hymnal to follow. You are expected to listen, intently, for hours. You shift on the hard bench, your back beginning to ache. You glance around. No one else is moving. Men, women, and even small children sit ramrod straight, their faces masks of concentration. They've been trained for this since birth. This is not entertainment. It is spiritual sustenance. This is the main event of their week. Here's a little detail they don't always mention in the history books to keep people awake during these marathon sessions. Some meeting houses had a tithing man or constable of the church who carried a long staff. On one end was a brass knob or a fox's tail for prodding sleeping men. On the other end was a feather to tickle the noses of women or children who were dozing off. You look towards the island, see a stern minus-faced man holding just such a staff, his eyes roving over the crowd. You immediately straighten your spine. The sermon drones on, a complex theological argument about covenant, grace, and predestination. The minister's words are a dense tapestry of biblical quotes and scholarly interpretations. For these people, theology was not an abstract academic exercise. They believed their very souls hung in the balance. Historians continue to debate how deeply the average farmer or housewife understood these intricate doctrines. Did they truly grasp the subtle differences between Arminianism and Calvinism? Or was it the ritual, the community, and the sheer force of the minister's personality that held their devotion? Looking at the focused faces around you, it seems to be a powerful mix of both. After what feels like an eternity, probably 2 or 3 hours, the sermon concludes. But you're not done. There's a short break for a cold lunch, often eaten in a nearby Sabbath house or simply outside, before you all file back in for the afternoon service. Another 2-3 hours of prayer and preaching. By the time you finally stumble out of the meeting house in the late afternoon, your mind is numb and your body is sore. The sun is low in the sky, and as you walk back home in the somber quiet, you understand this day isn't a day of rest. It's a day of intense spiritual labor, the foundation upon which this entire society is built. The rigid structure of the Sabbath bleeds into the rest of the week, not in its enforced idleness, but in its sense of constant, silent observation. You quickly learn that your life is no longer your own private affair. It's a public performance, and everyone in town has a front minus row seat. The concept of minding your own business hasn't been invented yet. Dear, your neighbor's business is your business, and yours is theirs. It's a divinely mandated social contract. You feel it when you walk to the well in the morning to draw water. The well is the town's social hub, the 17th minus century equivalent of an office water cooler. As you work the creaking windlass, you can feel the eyes on you. Goodwife Smith, on the other side of the square, stopped sweeping her stoop to watch you. 2 men, supposedly mending a fence, pause their hammering to note who you're talking to. Their gazes aren't necessarily malicious. It's just data collection. They are taking stock. Are you diligent? Are you cheerful? Is your bucket properly scrubbed? Every action is a clue to your character, your moral fiber. You're not just fetching water. You're demonstrating your piety and your fitness as a member of this godly community. This constant, low minus level surveillance was a key feature of Puritan life. They called it watchfulness. It was a collective responsibility to ensure that everyone in the community walked the straight and narrow path. If a neighbor started to stray by being lazy, or quarrelsome, or dressing to fancy lie, it was your duty to admonish them, gently at first, for the good of their soul and the health of the community. The layout of the town itself is designed to facilitate this, unlike the scattered, isolated farms of other colonies like Virginia. New England settlements were deliberately compact. Houses were clustered together around the meeting house and the central common. This wasn't just for defense against potential threats. It was for social and spiritual cohesion. You couldn't avoid your neighbors even if you wanted to. You saw them every day, multiple times a day. Their lives were interwoven with yours in a dense, inescapable tapestry. You start to notice the little things. You mention to your host, Goodwife Brown, that you're real low on flour. The next day, her husband remarks in passing that he heard you might need to make a trip to the grist mill soon. You didn't tell him. You didn't tell anyone but his wife. Inside your own home, the walls, it seems, are not only thin, but they also have ears that report directly to the town's central information network. This brings us to a wonderfully mundane piece of historical evidence, the seating chart of the meeting house. The seating, which you experienced on Sunday, wasn't random. It was a meticulously crafted map of the town's social hierarchy, and it was a constant source of tension. A committee would seat the meeting house every few years, assigning spots based on a complex and unwritten formula of age, wealth, and spiritual standing. To be moved down from your previous spot was a public humiliation. To be given a better seat was a mark of honor. Historians still argue over the exact weight given to each factor. Was it money that got you the best seat, or a reputation for piety? The surviving records of disputes over seating show it was a very big deal. Your assigned bench told everyone in town exactly where you stood. You experienced this social scrutiny firsthand in a small, mortifying way. One afternoon, while mending a shirt, your needle slips and you prick your finger. You let out a small, sharp out. Nothing more. Later that evening, the minister makes a casual visit. After some pleasantries, he mentions that he hoped you are not given to idle exclamations, and that one's tongue should always be tempered with grace. Someone, somewhere, a child playing outside the open window, a neighbor passing by heard that tiny sound, processed it, and felt it was their duty to report it up the chain of command. It feels suffocating, this web of observation. You start to police your own thoughts, your own expressions. You find yourself adopting the same placid, neutral face as everyone else. You measure your words before you speak, calculating their potential impact, how they might be interpreted or misinterpreted. Privacy, you realize, is a luxury you can no longer afford. It's a modern invention. Here, your life is an open book, and your name, the one you barely know in this new context, is a topic of quiet discussion in every home. They are all watching, they are all waiting, they are all judging, and you haven't even done anything wrong yet. As the days turn into weeks, you begin to understand that the surveillance isn't just external. The most powerful fences in this town aren't the wooden ones around the vegetable patches. They're the invisible ones erected inside your own mind. The community's rules aren't just enforced by nosy neighbors and watchful ministers. They are internalized, becoming a constant, humming background track to your every thought and action. You learn the rules of dress without anyone ever handing you a manual. It's all done through observation and subtle correction. One morning, you find a small, colorful ribbon you happen to have in your pocket, a trivial keepsake from your old life. You think to tie it in your hair, a tiny, harmless splash of color in this drab world. But as you're about to do it, you catch the eye of good wife Brown. She doesn't say a word. She just gives a slow, almost imperceptible shake of her head. The message is crystal clear: vanity, ostentation, pride. You quickly put the ribbon away. This was a real and pressing concern for the Puritan leadership. They passed laws, known as some PTU laws, that regulated what people could wear. These laws were meant to enforce social hierarchy and curb what they saw as sinful extravagance. For example, only people with a certain net worth were legally allowed to wear clothing with silk, gold buttons, or fine lace. It wasn't just about modesty. It was about knowing your place. You wore your social status on your sleeve, quite literally. A farmer's wife who dressed in silk wasn't just being fashionable. She was disrupting the God-ordained social order. You learn the rules of speech. You must always be plain, spoken and truthful. Exaggeration is a form of lying. Idle chatter is a waste of precious time that could be spent in productive labor or godly contemplation. The phrase "the devil finds work for idle hands" could just as easily be "the devil finds words for idle tongues." You learn to speak with purpose, to say what you mean and mean what you say. Flattery is suspect. Sarcasm is incomprehensible. Jokes are rare, and when they do occur, are usually dry. Biblically minus themed witticisms that don't quite land with your modern sensibilities. Even your leisure time was regulated. There are no theaters, no public festivals, no dancing around a maypole. The Puritans famously despised maypoles as pagan relics. Games of chance, like cards or dice, are forbidden. Music, except for the unaccompanied singing of psalms, is viewed with deep suspicion. The only acceptable forms of recreation are those that are practical or contribute to the community's well-B, like a raising bee, where the whole town comes together to build a new barn. It's communal, it's productive, and it's certainly not frivolous. Here's a quirky little detail that shows the extent of this mindset. The Puritans were famously against the celebration of Christmas. For them, it was a popish invention with no biblical basis, a holiday corrupted by pagan traditions of feasting and merrymaking. In the Massachusetts Bay Colony, celebrating Christmas was actually illegal for a time. You could be fined 5 shillings for feasting or for taking the day off work. Imagine getting in trouble for having a Christmas dinner. The most challenging fence to navigate is the one around your own thoughts. Puritans believed in the concept of predestination, the idea that God, from the beginning of time, has already chosen who will be saved, the elect, and who will be dead. You could never know for sure which group you were in, but your entire life was a search for signs of God's grace. This led to a constant, obsessive state of self-examination. You find yourself lying on your straw pallet at night, replaying every event of the day. Did I work hard enough? Was my prayer sincere? Was that flash of anger I felt when the bucket slipped a sign of my corrupt nature? Was the small joy I felt seeing the bread rise perfectly a sign of God's favor? Or was it a form of earthly pride? This internal monologue is exhausting. It's a psychological burden that the entire community shares, a collective anxiety about salvation. Historians have long debated the psychological impact of this doctrine. Some argue it created a population of incredibly driven, self-disciplined, and resilient individuals who built a society out of sheer force of will. Others argue it led to widespread anxiety, depression, and a culture of profound guilt. Perhaps the most accurate view is that it did both. It was a source of immense strength and immense stress, often at the same time. You look around at the stern, composed faces of your neighbors. You used to see them as judgmental and cold. Now, you see them differently. You see the immense effort it takes to maintain that composure, to live up to the impossible standards they set for themselves and for each other. They aren't just watching you. They are watching themselves with an even more critical eye. The fence isn't just to keep you in. It's to keep the ever-present threat of sin, disorder, and damnation out. And it is a full-time job. Your theoretical understanding of Puritan justice is about to get a very practical, very public update. It happens on a Tuesday, a day that starts like any other. The morning is filled with the usual rhythm of chores, but around midday, a subtle shift occurs. A low murmur spreads through the settlement. People start to down tools, doors open, and men and women begin to drift towards the town common, the open green space in front of the meeting house. There's no bell tolling, but it's clear something is happening. You follow the quiet, purposeful crowd. In the center of the common, your eyes are drawn to 2 objects that have stood there, silent and unused, since your arrival. One is the stocks, a wooden frame with holes for ankles and wrists. The other, standing nearby, is the whipping post. Today, they are not just scenery. A man is being led from the small, secure room that serves as the town jail. They chase a young man, a farmhand you've seen around. He isn't struggling. His face is a mask of grim resignation. The town constable, a stout man with an air of authority, walks beside him. The minister follows a few paces behind. A small crowd, which is to say, nearly the entire town, forms a silent circle. There's no shouting, no jeering. This isn't a spectacle for entertainment. It's a communal ritual, a public lesson. The constable announces the man's crime in a loud, clear voice. The man was found guilty by the town magistrates of being drunk and disorderly and for speaking blasphemous words while intoxicated. His punishment is twofold. First, the stocks. The constable forces the man to sit and locks his legs and hands into the wooden restraints. He is now immobilized, forced to sit in this uncomfortable, humiliating position, on public display for all to see. Children, who had been standing quietly with their parents, now inch closer, staring with wide, curious eyes. This is part of their education in civic and moral duty. This public shaming was a cornerstone of Puritan justice. For many lesser crimes like swearing, missing church, or engaging in a minor quarrel, the goal wasn't just to punish the offender, but to publicly reaffirm the community's values. By making the sinner a public spectacle, the town was collectively saying, "This is not who we are. This is what we reject." The shame, or stigma, was a more powerful deterrent than the physical discomfort. You watch as people walk by. Some stare at the man with cold disapproval. Others pointedly ignore him, which is somehow worse. A few of the more devout women mutter about the state of his soul. He just stares at the ground, his face burning with a shame that is palpable even from a distance. After an hour, the minister steps forward. He addresses not the man, but the crowd. He speaks of the evils of drink, the sin of a loose tongue, and the devil's power to corrupt a weak spirit. It's a short, impromptu sermon, using this poor man's transgression as a living textbook case. Then, the constable unlocks the stocks, but it's not over. The man is led to the whipping post. His back is bared. The constable holds up a whip. The minister says a brief prayer, and then the lashes fall. Each strike is counted out loud by the constable. The sound cracks through the quiet air. The crowd flinches, but no one looks away. They are witnesses. They are all complicit in this act of communal purification. This might seem brutal, and it was, but here's a fascinating, a slightly grim bit of context. Puritan law, specifically the Massachusetts Body of Liberties of 1641, was actually quite progressive for its time. It explicitly limited the number of lashes a person could receive to 40. This was based on a biblical prescription and was designed to prevent the kind of excessive, tortuous punishments common in Europe. It also forbade punishments that were inhumane, barbarous, or cruel. There's a deep, ongoing debate among legal historians about this. Were these laws a genuine sign of an enlightened and systematic legal mind, trying to create a more just society? Or was it simply a way to codify and control punishment within a rigid theological framework, making it efficient rather than merciful? When it's over, the man is released. He pulls on his shirt, his movements stiff with pain and shame, and melts back into the crowd. No one speaks to him. He is now an outcast, at least for a time. He will have to earn his way back into the community's good graces through hard work, humble behavior, and unwavering attendance at the meeting house. His debt has been paid publicly, and his repentance must be just as public. You walk back to your house, the image of the man's face seared into your mind. The message of the day's event is stark and clear. There are no private sins. A transgression by one individual is a stain upon the entire community, and it must be washed away in the full light of day. With everyone watching, you touch your own tongue, suddenly very aware of the words it might form. You think about the difference between a blasphemous word spoken in anger and a simple, careless comment. The line, you realize, might be thinner and more treacherous than you ever imagined. The silent fences have just been reinforced with a very real, very painful threat. Your recent, sobering lesson in public justice makes you hyper-minus aware of a particular figure in the community you denoticed before, but hadn't fully understood. H.E.S. not the minister, nor the constable, nor one of the formal magistrates. H.E.S. just a man, a farmer like many others, but he carries a specific, invisible authority. This is the tithing man, and his job, essentially, is to be your officially sanctioned nosy neighbor. You learn his identity subtly. One afternoon, you're helping Goodwife Brown weed the small herb garden behind the house. You're both tired, and for a moment, you lean against the house to rest. Heyman walking by on the path pauses. H.E.S.'s turn-minus-faced individual named Master Hawthorne. He doesn't say hello. He just looks at you, then at the weeds still in the garden, then back at you. He makes a small TSK sound with his tongue and walks on. Later, inside, Goodwife Brown speaks in a low voice. That was Master Hawthorne, the tithing man. Best not to be seen idle when he passes. The role of the tithing man is one of those wonderfully specific, slightly bizarre details of Puritan society. He wasn't a tithing man in the sense of collecting monetary tithes for the church. The name is older, derived from an Anglo-Saxon system of grouping 10 households together. In New England, his role was restorative. He was a low-level civil servant, appointed by the town, and his jurisdiction was the morals of about 10 or 12 of his neighbors. He was, quite literally, the designated supervisor of your family's spiritual and civic health. What was on his checklist? An incredible array of things. His official duties include making sure you and your family attended church every single Sunday. He was the one who would knock on your door if you were absent, demanding a reason. He was tasked with keeping order in the meeting house during the long services. He was the man with that staff for waking up dozing congregants. He was also supposed to ensure that children were being properly educated, meaning they were being taught to read the Bible and were learning their catechism. But his authority seeped into every corner of your life. He was supposed to report any disorders in his designated households. This could mean anything from excessive drinking to a husband and wife quarreling too loudly. It was his job to make sure no one was tippling at the local tavern after hours. And most relevant to your future, he was supposed to keep an ear out for idleness, profanity, and, of course, gossip. This is where things get interesting and a bit strange. The tithing man was a full-time employee. He was one of your neighbors, or peer. Imagine your next door neighbor being given a legal mandate to report you for not mowing your lawn or for arguing with your spouse. This created a complex social dynamic. Some tithing men were undoubtedly zealous, eager to find fault and assert their authority. Others probably hated the job, finding it awkward and unpleasant to police their own friends and neighbors. The position was often rotated, so the man you were wary of one year could be back to being just a regular neighbor the next. Historians often puzzle over the effectiveness of the tithing man. Did this system actually reduce crime and improve public morals, or did it just breed resentment and an atmosphere of mutual suspicion? The court records from the period are filled with cases brought forth by tithing men, so they were certainly active. They reported people for everything from uncharitable speeches to abusing their cattle. But it's hard to measure the preventative effect. How many quarrels were silenced? How many curses swallowed? Simply because someone knew Master Hawthorne might be walking by. You start to notice him everywhere. You see him questioning a group of young boys who were laughing a bit too loudly near the common. You see him having a quiet but intense word with a man leaving the tavern. His presence is a constant, physical reminder of the community's expectations. He is the embodiment of watchfulness, the community's eyes and ears, tasked with sniffing out the first faint whiffs of sin before it could blossom into a full-blown scandal. One evening, as you sit by the fire, you find yourself thinking about the sheer pressure of it all. In your old life, you could complain about your boss, share a juicy bit of celebrity news, or vent about a rude stranger. It was meaningless, ephemeral. Here, every word has weight. Every statement could be scrutinized, judged, and potentially reported. You realize that, in this society, there is no such thing as an off-the-record conversation. The tithing man's shadow looms over every interaction. He represents a system where your private life is a public trust, and any failure to uphold that trust has consequences. You make a mental note: be extra careful, extra quiet, extra diligent. Avoid Master Hawthorne's gaze at all costs. It's a strategy for survival, but survival, you're about to learn, can be very, very boring, and boredom can lead to carelessness. Life settles into a monotonous, grinding rhythm. Wake, work, eat, sleep. The highlight of your day is successfully churning butter. The most exciting event of your week is a slightly larger minus than minus usual batch of bread. The constant vigilance, the fear of the tithing man, the sheer physical exhaustion, it all conspires to keep you in line. But the human mind is not built for an ending, virtuous monotony. It craves novelty. It craves story. And in a world with no books, no plays, and no news beyond the town limits, the only source of news stories is other people. Your moment of temptation arrives, as it so often does, at the town wheel. The well is one of the few places where social interaction is not only permitted but necessary. It's a nexus of communication, the only place to get fresh water and fresh information. You're either one afternoon, hauling up a heavy wooden bucket, your arms aching. A few other women from the settlement are there as well, a small cluster of dark wool and white linen bonnets. Their conversation is the usual fare, the health of their children, the price of corn, the endless battle against mildew. It's dull, safe, and utterly uninteresting. You are only half minus listening, focused on your task. But then, the tone shifts. Two of the women, Goodwife Parsons and a younger woman named Prudence, draw a little closer to each other. Their voices drop to a conspiratorial whisper. You can't help but overhear. Your ears, starved for any kind of narrative, pick up. They aren't talking about the weather anymore. They're talking about the minister's wife. Specifically, they're talking about the new lace cap she wore to the meeting last Sunday. It wasn't fancy lace, not by your modern standards. It was a simple, modest trimming. But in this world of aggressive plainness, it stood out. Did you say it? Prudence whispers, her eyes wide. Real bobbin lace. From Boston. Did wager. I saw it. Goodwife Parsons replies, her voice tight with a disapproval that's so sharp it's almost delicious. A bit fine for a minister's wife. Some might say, a poor example of humility. This is it. This is the spark. It's not a vicious rumor. It's not a lie. The minister's wife did wear a new cap. It was trimmed with lace. The rest is just interpretation. And that's what makes it so irresistible. It's a tiny crack in the perfectly pious facade of the town's most important family. You try to ignore it. You focus on coiling the rope. You tell yourself this is idle talk, the very thing you've been so careful to avoid. But the story is a hook, and it has caught you. You find yourself leaning in, just slightly, to catch the next part. And they say, Prudence adds, her voice barely audible, that she paid for it not with her husband's stipend, but with money from her family back in England, a family with considerable mercantile interests. This is the payload, the little detail that transforms a simple observation about a hat into a subtle commentary on wealth, class, and potential hypocrisy. It implies that the minister's family might have access to a level of worldly comfort that they publicly preach against. This is a perfect example of what gossip is in this context. It's not necessarily false information. In fact, the most effective gossip is often rooted in truth. The sin isn't in the lie. It's in the intent. It's in the uncharitable framing of that truth. This is a distinction that Puritan legal and religious thinkers spent a lot of time on. They differentiated between tale-bearing, spreading rumors, and slander, telling malicious lies. Both were sins, but slander was a much more serious offense that could land you in court. What you're hearing now exists in that murky grey area. Here's a little known fact that highlights their obsession with controlling speech. Some New England towns actually appointed officials to inspect the ordinaries, the taverns, to ensure that the patrons weren't engaging in sinful conversation while they drank their ale. Imagine a conversation police listening in on your happy hour. You pull up your bucket, the wood scraping against the stone well. The conversation stops. The women turn to you. Their faces are blank, but you can feel the question in the air. Did you hear? What do you think? You have a choice. You can give an uncommittal nod, turn, and walk away. This is the safe, pious, and soul-crushingly boring option. Or you can offer a small sign of complicity, a raised eyebrow, a slight smirk, a quiet "is that so?" and join the circle of knowledge. You don't say a word. You just meet Goodwife Parsons's gaze for a second too long, a tiny flicker of shared understanding passing between you. And in that moment, without speaking a single syllable, you become part of the conspiracy. You pick up your heavy buckets and start to walk home. But you're carrying more than just water now. You're carrying a secret. It's a small, trivial, and utterly useless secret, but it feels warm and exciting in the cold, dull landscape of your life. You tell yourself it's harmless. It's just a cap. After all, what possible trouble could come from a little bit of lace? The secret sits with you for the rest of the day. a little pocket of warmth against the chill of routine. You replay the conversation at the well, savoring the subtle nuances of disapproval in Goodwife Parsons's voice. It feels like a key, a small piece of insider knowledge that makes you feel, for the first time, less like an outsider and more like a part of the town's intricate social machinery. You tell yourself you won't repeat it. It's enough just to know. But knowledge, especially the forbidden kind, is a restless thing. It wants to be shared. The desire to tell someone is a physical itch. Your opportunity comes the next evening. The day's work is done. The main meal has been eaten. The head of the household, Goodman Brown, is outside securing the livestock for the night. The children are asleep on their pallets. It's just you and Goodwife Brown, sitting by the fire in the relative quiet of the hall. The only sounds are the crackling of the logs and the rhythmic clacking of her knitting needles. The atmosphere is as close to intimate as you've ever experienced in this house. The shadows dance on the walls, creating a fleeting illusion of privacy. Goodwife Brown lets out a weary sigh, a rare crack in her usually stoic demeanor. The days are long, she says, more to herself than to you. And there it is, your opening, a moment of shared humanity, a brief lowering of the guard. Your brain, desperate for connection, sees its chance. This isn't like the public forum of the well. This is different. This is private. Just two women, sharing a quiet moment. What could be the harm? Something I heard today might lighten the load. You begin, trying to sound casual. Your heart starts to beat a little faster. You know you are crossing a line. Goodwife Brown stops knitting. She looks at you, her expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. Though, you lean forward, lowering your voice, mimicking the conspiratorial tone you heard at the well. It's about the minister's wife, and the new cap she wore on Sunday. You see a flicker of interest in her eyes. You have her attention. You lay out the story, just as you heard it. You talk about the fineness of the lace, the speculation that it came from Boston, and the juicy little detail about the money from her wealthy family in England. You present it not as fact, but as something you overheard, a little piece of they say. I only tell you, of course, you add quickly, a phrase as old as gossip itself. I wouldn't want it to be spread about. This sentence is the classic, self-minus deceiving absolution of the gossiper. It's an attempt to signal your own virtue while simultaneously engaging in the very act you're condemning. Goodwife Brown listens silently, her head tilted. When you finish, she doesn't respond immediately. She just picks up her knitting and starts again, the clacking of the needles filling the silence. For a moment, you panicked. Did you misread the situation? Have you just committed a grave error, confessing your engagement in idle talk to this pillar of rectitude? Then, she speaks, her voice slow and even. Her mother's family were in the cloth trade. It's true, always had a taste for finer things. Not always a blessing. That relief washes over you. She didn't condemn you. She added to the story. She confirmed a detail. She's in it with you. You've successfully forged a bond, a tiny alliance of shared, slightly uncharitable knowledge. For the rest of the evening, the air between you feels different. Woman, you shared a secret, and in doing so, you've become closer. This dynamic is something social historians find fascinating. In tightly controlled societies where open emotional expression is suppressed, gossip can become a crucial, if risky, tool for building relationships and alliances. It creates an N- group of those who know the secret, setting them apart from the out- group of the uninformed. By sharing this morsel of information with Goodwife Brown, you have moved her from the general population into your personal circle of trust. What you don't realize is that you've also just participated in a classic chain reaction. The information has been passed from one person to the next, like a bucket of water in a fire brigade line. But, unlike water, which remains the same in every bucket, a story changes with each telling. A little detail is added here, a subtle emphasis shifted there. You also fail to appreciate a fundamental truth of this small, interconnected world. There are no truly private conversations. Your quiet chat by the fire feels secluded, but it's not. Sound travels in these small, quiet houses, A child you thought was asleep might be awakened listening. The thin wooden walls might not be enough to contain your hushed voices from someone passing close by the house. There's a strange paradox that historians of communication point out sometimes. The less mass media society has, the faster information and misinformation can travel on a personal level, without newspapers or town criers to provide an official version of events. The unofficial, person-to-person network becomes incredibly powerful and incredibly fast. You go to sleep that night feeling pleased with yourself. You navigated a complex social interaction, and you think you succeeded. You strengthened the relationship and offloaded the burden of your secret. You feel lighter. You have no idea that the small spark you just fanned has already escaped the fireplace and is about to land on the dry tinder of the town's collective imagination. The morning after your confidential chat with Goodwife Brown, you feel a subtle but distinct shift in the air. Nothing has outwardly changed, but when you go to the well, you notice that Goodwife Parsons gives you a knowing little nod. It's a confirmation. You are now officially part of the N-the-No Club. The secret is a shared currency, and you've proven you're willing to trade in it. But what you fail to grasp is the incredible speed and transformative power of the town's information network. Your story, the one you so carefully shared in the privacy of your home, is already on the move, and it is no longer your story. You get the first hint of this later in the day. You're repassing the blacksmith shop, and you hear two men talking inside. You catch a few words drifting out over the clang of the hammer. A whole craterlet from London, now Boston, and then a low chuckle. You pause. Hey crate, London. Your little story about a lace cap has already begun to inflate. The single, delicate trim has become a whole crate of luxury goods. The origin has become more exotic, moving from a regional trade hub to the decadent heart of the old world. This is the telephone game in its most potent, pre-minus electronic form. Each person who retells the story isn't necessarily trying to lie. They're trying to make the story better, more interesting, more compelling. A lace cap is minor. A crate of lace is a scandal. People unconsciously embellish, adding details to give the narrative more weight and to make themselves sound more important for knowing them. Over the next 2 days, you watch, with a growing sense of dread, as the story you unleashed takes on a life of its own. It's like watching a small fire you set to warm your hands leap out of the fire pit and start catching on the dry grass nearby. You overhear two women talking by the fence. The story has now evolved. It's not just lace anymore. It's silk dresses. It's silver buckles. The minister's wife is no longer just a bit vain. She's secretly living a life of lavish luxury, hidden behind the plain walls of the manse. By the end of the week, the story has reached its full, monstrous bloom. The final version, which he whispered with shocked delight by a group of men loitering near the meeting house, is almost unrecognizable. The minister himself, it is now said, is complicit. He has been using church funds, the very money the townspeople tithe from their meager earnings, to finance his wife's extravagant tastes. The secret crate of goods from London is now being hidden in the cellar of the meeting house itself. The rumor has transformed from a minor critique of personal vanity into a serious accusation of embezzlement and hypocrisy, aimed directly at the spiritual leader of the community. It has become a direct challenge to his authority and the moral integrity of the entire town leadership. This is where the line between simple gossip and the crime of defamation becomes critically important. What started as an uncharitable but true observation has mutated into a slanderous and potentially provable lie. Puritan courts took this very seriously. A person's reputation, their good name, was considered a valuable asset. To damage it with false words was a form of theft, and it was punishable by law. You could be sued for it. Here's a peculiar historical tidbit: women were disproportionately accused of gossip and defamation in Puritan New England. Historians have endlessly debated why this was. Was it because women, largely excluded from formal positions of power, used speech and social networks as their primary means of influence? Or was it simply a reflection of a patriarchal society's inherent distrust of female speech, viewing it as inherently more prone to vanity, idleness, and falsehood? The records show that courts were filled with she said cases, intricate disputes that originated from whispers and quarrels between neighbors. You feel a cold knot of fear tightening in your stomach. This has spiraled out of control. You want to stand up and shout, "No, it was just a hair, a small bit of lace. You've got it all wrong." But how can you? To do so would be to admit that you were a part of the chain. You were there at the beginning. You helped push the snowball down the hill. Your small, thrilling secret has become a dangerous, public lie. The warmth it gave you has turned into a cold sweat. You look at the faces of the people repeating the story. They're not just sharing information anymore. There's a glint in their eyes, a sense of excitement. The tell, starved for drama, has found a feast. And you, in your foolish desire for a moment of connection, provided the first course. You are no longer a passive observer of this fire. You can smell the smoke on your own clothes. You can feel the heat getting closer. And you have a terrible, sinking feeling that when people start looking for the source of the blaze, the trail of sparks is going to lead directly to you. The firestorm you helped create now rages through the settlement, and the mood of the town's hours, the initial excitement of the juicy rumor, curdles into something ugly as suspicion and division. People start taking sides. Some vehemently defend the minister, seeing the rumor as a malicious attack from the devil himself, meant to sow discord among the faithful. Others, perhaps those who have felt slighted by the minister or who harbor some hidden resentment, cling to the story with a grim satisfaction. The silent, unified front of the community has fractured. You see it in the small interactions. Conversations stop abruptly when someone from the opposing camp approaches. Neighbors who once shared pleasantries now pass each other with stony faces. The town common, once a space of communal gathering, now feels like a tense, contested territory. The story of the lace cap is no longer a piece of gossip. It is a loyalty test. The minister, a man whose authority had seemed absolute, now looks strained. During the next Sunday service, his sermon is fiery, focusing on the sin of bearing false witness against one's neighbor. He speaks with a passion that feels deeply personal. As he preaches, he looks out over the congregation, his eyes seeming to search for the source of the poison. You shrink down on your bench, feeling the weight of his gaze even though it's not directed specifically at you. You can feel the collective discomfort in the room. The sermon isn't just theology anymore. It's a public accusation. It's inevitable that an official inquiry begins. I rumor this damaging, targeting the spiritual leader of the town, cannot be ignored. It threatens the very foundation of their city upon a hill. The town magistrates, a small group of the most respected and powerful men, begin a quiet investigation. This isn't a modern police procedural. There's no forensics, no high-minded surveillance. The investigation is a purely social exercise. It's a process of unraveling the chain of communication, link by painful link. The magistrates start at the end of the chain, with the men who were speaking the most flagrant versions of the story. They are called one by one into a private room in the minister's house for questioning. The process is simple. Where did you hear this story? The first man, under the stern gaze of the magistrates, quickly points to the person who told it. That person is then summoned. And where did you hear this? The chain begins to be traced backward. The blacksmith who heard it from a farmer, the farmer who heard it from his wife, the wife who heard it at the market from another woman. Each person in the chain, when confronted, has a choice: protect their source and risk being seen as the originator of the slander, or give up the name of the person who told them and pass the blame one step further down the line. In this community, where loyalty to the truth and to authority is paramount, the choice is almost always the same. Dito. You feel the net closing in. You don't know the exact progress of the investigation, but you can feel it moving through the town like a slow, inexorable tide. You see Goodwife Parsons, the woman from the well, hurrying home one afternoon with a grin, tight minus slipped expression. You know she's been questioned. You know what she must have said. Then, you learn what happened to Prudence, the other woman from the well. She was the one who added the detail about the money from England. When questioned, she apparently broke down in tears, confessed everything, and named you and Goodwife Parsons as being there with her. The focus is narrowing. The trail of breadcrumbs, or in this case, whispers, is leading to that fateful conversation at the well. This is a classic feature of Puritan legal culture that modern historians find both fascinating and horrifying. The immense pressure to confess was a core part of the system. An unrepentant sinner was a danger to the entire community. A festering wound. A confession, however, was the first step toward healing, both for the individual's soul and for the community. The system was designed not just to find guilt, but to produce repentance. This is the same psychological mechanism that would later play a much darker role in the Salem witch trials. One evening, Goodwife Brown is quiet, quieter than usual. She avoids your gaze. The tentative bond you thought you had formed over the shared secret has evaporated. It's been replaced by a cold, formal distance. She knows. You don't know how she knows. Maybe her husband is one of the magistrates. Maybe she heard it from another woman, but she knows your name has come up. She is silently, preemptively, distancing herself from you. You are becoming contaminated. You are now isolated. The few tentative connections you had made have been severed by fear. People who might have smiled at you a week ago now look straight through you. You are an island in the middle of the town, and the tide of their suspicion is rising all around you. You lie awake on your pallet, staring into the darkness, your mind racing. You trace the steps, from the overheard whisper to the careless words spoken by the fire. It all seemed so small, so insignificant at the time. How could it have come to this? You didn't invent the lie. You didn't even spread the worst parts of it. You were just one of the first links in a long chain. But you're beginning to understand the harsh truth of this world in a firestorm. The one who provided the first spark often bears the most blame. The knock on the door is no longer a possibility. It is an inevitability. The knock comes on a grey, drizzly afternoon. It's not a loud, aggressive banging, but a firm, deliberate tap on the heavy wooden door. It's the kind of knock that doesn't need to be loud to command attention. Your heart, which has been simmering in a low-grade panic for days, gives a painful lurch and seems to stop altogether. This is it. Goodwife Brown, who is kneading dough on the trestle table, freezes for a second. Her hands stop mid-motion. She looks at you, and in her eyes, you see not pity, but a kind of weary resignation. This trouble has now officially crossed her threshold. She wipes her hands on her apron, walks to the door, and lifts the latch. Standing on the doorstep, silhouetted against the bleak afternoon light, are two men. One is the minister himself, his face a stern, unreadable mass. The other is Master Hawthorne, the tithing man, your personal moral supervisor. Seeing him there confirms your worst fears. This isn't a friendly visit. This is official. Good day, Goodwife Brown, the minister says, his voice polite but devoid of warmth. May we have a word with the woman who lodges with you? He doesn't use your name. He doesn't need to. There's only one person it could be. Goodwife Brown simply nods and steps aside, opening the door wider to let them in. She doesn't look at you. She immediately returns to her dough, punching and turning it with a vigor that seems designed to signal her complete detachment from the proceedings. She is just a baker. This has nothing to do with her. The two men step inside, bringing the damp chill of the outside world with them. They remove their broad brimmed hats, a gesture of respect for the home, but the formality only makes the situation more intimidating. The room, which already felt small, now seems to shrink, crowded by their severe presence. We need you to come with us, the minister says, his gaze finally settling on you. It's not an angry look. It's a look of profound disappointment, which is somehow far worse. It's the look of a shepherd who has found a loss, and very foolish. There's no point in asking why. There's no point in protesting your innocence. The time for that is over. The very fact that they are here, together, is the verdict. The investigation has done its work, and all roads have led to your door, or, more accurately, to the memory of your voice. You stand up, your legs feeling unsteady. You smooth down your apron with trembling hands. A useless, automatic gesture. You look at Goodwife Brown's back, hoping for some sign of support, but she remains resolutely focused on her work. You are on your own. You follow the two men out of the house. The drizzle has picked up, a fine, cold mist that clings to your clothes. As you walk through the muddy track that serves as a street, you feel the weight of 100 eyes on you. The news of the minister's visit has already spread with supernatural speed. Faces appear in the small, papered windows of the house as you pass. People who were mending fences or chopping wood pause their work to stare. Their faces are a mixture of curiosity, disapproval, and a certain grim satisfaction. The mystery has been solved. The culprit has been identified. This public walk is part of the process. It's a transition from private suspicion to public accusation. It's the 17th century equivalent of being put in the back of a police car. Everyone sees it. Everyone understands what it means. Your reputation, which was already fraying, is now being publicly shredded with every step you take. Here's an interesting aspect of Puritan law. They didn't really have lawyers in the modern sense, especially not for these kinds of moral or religious offenses. You couldn't lawyer up. You were expected to speak for yourself, to answer the questions put to you directly by the magistrates and the minister. The system was predicated on the idea that the truth would reveal itself through direct confrontation and examination, guided by godly men. The thought of a paid advocate arguing legal technicalities would have been seen as an attempt to obscure the truth, not find it. You are not led to the meeting house or the town jail. Instead, they lead you to the minister's own house. This is significant. It means this is not yet a formal criminal proceeding. If it were a serious crime like theft or assault, you'd be facing the secular magistrates in a more official capacity. This is a church matter, an internal affair. You have broken a rule of the community's spiritual covenant, and so you must answer to the keepers of that covenant. They lead you into the minister's study. It's a room you've never seen before. It's small, but it feels like the center of power in the town. It's lined with shelves holding a surprising number of large, leather-bound books. In a society with so few books, this collection represents an immense concentration of knowledge and authority. A simple wooden desk and 3 chairs are the only other furniture. The room smells of old paper, leather, and beeswax. The minister and the tithing man take their seats behind the desk. They gesture for you to take the chair opposite them. Use it, perching on the edge of the hard wooden seat. The door is closed, and the sound of the rain outside seems to fade away. There is only the heavy, expectant silence in the room. The informal hearing, the one that will decide the fate of your good name, is about to begin. The minister steeples his fingers and rests them on the desk. He looks at you, his eyes patient but firm. This isn't an interrogation room in a crime drama. There's no good cop, bad cop. Master Hawthorne, the tithing man, sits beside him, silent and solid as a block of granite. His presence alone a form of pressure. The minister will do all the talking. We have spent the last week. He begins, his voice calm and measured, unraveling a most unfortunate and slanderous tale that has caused great pain and division within our flock. He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle in the small room. A tale concerning my wife, and indeed, myself. A tale of vanity and, in its ugliest form, of deceit. He doesn't ask if you know what he's talking about. He knows you know. Our investigation, which has been a matter of great sorrow for us, has traced this weed of falsehood back to its very root. And the root, it seems, was a conversation that took place at the town well nearly 2 weeks ago. He looks at you, waiting. This is your chance to speak, to confess. The entire system is built on this moment. They don't want to just convict you. They want to guide you to self-conviction. Your mind races. What can you possibly say? It was just a joke. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't mean any harm. All of these excuses would sound frivolous, childish, a confirmation of your guilt. You try to think of a defense. You could deny it, but prudence has already confessed and implicated you. You could try to shift the blame entirely to the other women, but that would be a lie and would only make you look worse. You choose silence, which is perhaps the worst option of all. In this context, silence is not a right. It's a sign of a hardened, unrepentant heart. The minister sighs, a sound of deep disappointment. Prudence and Goodwife parsons have both spoken to us. They have confessed their part in this idle and uncharitable talk. They have told us that you were there. They have told us that you participated. He leans forward slightly. Now, we have heard from another source, from Goodwife Brown. She has told us, with much reluctance, that you brought this story into her home, that you were the one who took the spark from the well and carried it to her hearth. Is this not so? The confirmation that Goodwife Brown informed on you is a cold blow, even though you expected it. You feel utterly betrayed, but you also understand she was protecting her own family, her own standing in this world. Loyalty to the community's order trumps any fledgling personal bond. Tell us what you said. The minister commands. It's not a question, it's an order. And so, in a halting, quiet voice, you tell them. You recount the story as you first heard it. You admit to repeating it to Goodwife Brown. You try to emphasize that you only repeated what you heard, that you didn't invent the worst parts of the rumor about the crate or the church funds. You are trying to minimize your crime, to frame yourself as a passive conduit rather than an active creator of the lie. The minister listens patiently until you are finished. He doesn't seem angry. He seems almost clinical, like a doctor diagnosing a disease. So you admit to being a tale minus bearer, he says, using the specific biblical term. You took up a report against your neighbor without knowing it to be true, and you spread it. You did this for a purpose, for the thrill of a secret, to feel important, to maliciously wound the reputation of another. This is the heart of the matter. They are not just concerned with what you did, but why you did it. Your motivation is the key to understanding the state of your soul. This is a point of deep theological and historical debate. Were these Puritan leaders genuinely concerned with the inner spiritual state of their flock, acting as compassionate if stern soul-minus physicians? Or was this focus on motivation a sophisticated love social control, forcing individuals to internalize the community's values and police their own thoughts? The truth is likely an inseparable combination of both. I meant no harm, you stammer. It's the weakest offense, and you know it as soon as you say it. Meaning no harm is not a defense against the harm that was done. The minister replies, his voice sharp for the first time. A fire set by a child who means no harm can still burn down a house. Your idle tongue has threatened the peace and unity of this entire community. A community built on a covenant of mutual trust. You have broken that trust. Master Hawthorne finally speaks, his voice a low rumble. This is what comes of idleness, the sin of an ungoverned tongue. The minister nods. Indeed, and it is a sin that cannot be left to fester. He leans back in his chair, his face softening slightly. The magistrates could take this up. Spreading such a slander against a minister is a serious offense. It could result in a fine or public humiliation in the stocks. But the damage done here is not primarily to my property or person. It is to the spiritual fabric of our town. Therefore, the remedy must also be spiritual. He lets that sink in. He is offering you a way out, a path that avoids the secular courts and the physical punishment of the stocks. It feels like a mercy, but you have a sinking feeling that the alternative will have its own unique kind of pain. The questioning is over. The judgment is coming. The minister looks from you to Master Hawthorne, a silent communication passing between them. Then he turns his attention back to you, adopting the tone of a teacher explaining a difficult but necessary lesson. In our laws, both the laws of God and the laws of this colony, he begins, we make a distinction. There is a difference between telling a lie and bearing false witness. Both are sins, but the latter is a dagger pointed at the heart of an orderly society. You listen, trying to understand. This isn't just a lecture. This is the theological and legal framework for your punishment. He is explaining the nature of your crime before he announces the sentence. To tell a simple lie, he continues, to say, I have finished my chores, when you have not, for instance, is a private sin between you and God. It reveals a flaw in your character, certainly, but it may harm no one but yourself. But to bear false witness, to spread a tale that damages the good name of another. That is a public sin. Your reputation, your good name, is a gift from God. It is the foundation of trust upon which we build our families, our church, and our town. To attack it with words is as wicked as attacking a person's body with a stone or their property with a torch. He picks up a heavy Bible from his desk. The 9th commandment does not say, "Thou shalt not lie." It says, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." The distinction is crucial. It is about the damage done to the community. This is a core concept in Puritan thought, and a point that legal historians find fascinating. They had an almost obsessive focus on the social consequences of sin. While they believed deeply in individual salvation, they also believed that the community was a single body. A sin committed by one member was a sickness that could infect the whole. Therefore, sins that threaten the social order like heresy, public drunkenness, or slander were treated with extreme seriousness. Now, the minister says, there are levels to this sin. Had you invented a malicious lie from whole cloth, with a clear intent to destroy my wife's reputation, that would be slander of the highest order. That would be a matter for the magistrates and the whipping post. You feel a small, cold flicker of relief. You are not accused of that, at least. But what you did, he says, his eyes narrowing slightly, was to participate in tale minus bearing and backbiting. You heard an unproven, uncharitable story, a flying report instead of letting it die. You gave it new life. You nurtured it. You passed it on. Your tongue was, as the Apostle James tells us, a restless evil, full of deadly poison. He uses the term idle tongue, which to you sounds almost quaint, like a minor failing. But to him, it's a specific and serious diagnosis. Idleness was the enemy of virtue. An idle mind had time for doubt. Idle hands had time for mischief. And an idle tongue, one not engaged in prayer, praise, or productive conversation, had time to spread poison. Here's a quirky and specific detail about their legal system. Some court records show people being punished for reviling speeches or scurrilous language. This wasn't just about lying. It was about the tone and intent of your speech. You could be punished for being too quarrelsome, for being sarcastic, or for speaking about your neighbors in a way that was deemed uncharitable, even if what you were saying was technically true. The goal was to enforce social harmony, even at the cost of personal expression. You did not invent the fire, the minister concedes, but you willingly helped to pass the torch. You became a link in a chain of sin that has wrapped itself around this community. Do you understand the gravity of that? You nod, your throat too tight to speak. You do understand. You understand that in this world, words are not just sounds. They are actions. They have weight and consequence. Your careless conversation was not a conversation. It was an act of social disruption. The historians and theologians will likely argue for centuries. The minister says, almost to himself, about the precise line where idle chat becomes a damnable sin. Is it the moment the thought is formed, the moment it is spoken, the moment it is heard by a third party? It is a difficult and thorny question. He shakes his head, as if clearing it of abstract thought, and focuses on you again, his expression all business. But what is not difficult to determine is that your actions, regardless of their precise theological classification, have caused a wound, and a wound must be cleansed and healed, publicly, so that the whole body may recover. He has laid out the case against you. He has defined your crime not as you see it, an embarrassing social blunder, but as he sees it, a spiritual sickness that threatens the town's very soul. He has explained why it matters. He has built the foundation, stone by heavy stone. Now, all that is left is to place the capstone, your sentence. You brace yourself for the worst, the stocks, the public shaming you witnessed on your first week here, or maybe a hefty fine, one you have no way of paying. You picture yourself locked in that uncomfortable wooden frame, the object of the town's scorn. But the minister says something that surprises you. The stocks and the lash are for those with hardened hearts who refuse to see their error. They are for punishing the body when the soul will not bend. But you, he says, peering at you intently, I believe your soul is not yet hardened. I believe you can be brought to a true and sincere repentance. He is offering you a different path. It is not a path of mercy in the modern sense, but a path of a different kind of correction, one that targets not your body, but your pride. The sin was committed by the tongue, he declares. Therefore, the penance must also be performed by the tongue. You have spoken words of falsehood in private whispers. You will now speak words of truth in a public confession. Your blood runs cold, i.e. public confession, in front of everyone. He elaborates. Next Sunday, at the morning service, after the sermon, you will stand before the entire congregation, and you will deliver an apology. This was a very real and surprisingly common form of punishment in Puritan New England, especially for offenses like slander, defamation, or challenging the authority of the church. It was a masterpiece of psychological control. It cost the state nothing. It involved no physical violence, but it was, for many, more terrifying than the lash. It forced the offender to be an active participant in their own humiliation. You will confess your sin of spreading idle tales. The minister continues, outlining the terms. You will admit that you spoke without knowledge and with an uncharitable heart. You will ask for the forgiveness of God, of the church, and specifically of my wife and myself, whom you have wronged. The thought of it makes your stomach churn. To stand up, alone, with every single person in the town staring at you, their eyes filled with judgment, and to speak those words of self-abasement, it feels like an impossible task. The shame would be overwhelming. This is not a punishment meant to destroy you, the minister says, perhaps sensing your terror. It is a ritual of restoration. When you confess your sin publicly, you are cleansing not only your own soul but the soul of the community. You are mending the tear in the social fabric that you helped create. Your public shame is the price of public harmony. When you are forgiven, the entire community can move on, healed and whole again. It's a fascinating, if brutal, piece of social engineering. The goal is reintegration, not permanent ostracism. By performing this ritual, you are given a clear, prescribed path back into the community's good graces. It's a public shaming, yes, but it's a shaming with a purpose and, most importantly, an end point. Once it's done, your debt is paid. This brings up a debate that still circulates among historians of law and society, which is a more humane form of justice, the swift, physical punishment of the whipping post, which is over in minutes, or the prolonged psychological agony of a public apology, where the shame can linger for years. There's no easy answer. The Puritans clearly believed that a punishment aimed at the soul and the conscience was more meaningful and ultimately more effective than one aimed merely at the skin. And what about the others? You find the courage to ask in a small voice. And the other women? Prudence and good wife Parsons? They too will be dealt with according to the nature of their involvement. The minister says evasively. Prudence, for her part in adding falsehoods to the story, will also be required to make a confession. Good wife Parsons, whose role was lesser, has been given a severe private admonishment. The punishment is tailored to the sin, but it's clear from his tone that you, as the one who carried the story from the semi-minus public space of the well into the private space of a home, are being made the primary example. He stands up, signaling that the meeting is over. You have until the Sabbath to prepare your heart and your words. I trust you will spend that time in prayer and sober reflection on your transgression. Master Hawthorne stands as well. He hasn't said more than a few words, but his silent, judgmental presence has been a crucial part of the pressure. He will be the one to escort you home. You leave the minister's study in a daze. The sentence has been passed. It's not the stocks. It's not the lash. It's not a fine. It is, in its own way, something far more intimate and dreadful. They are not going to lock up your body. They are going to unlock your deepest fear, the fear of total, absolute public humiliation. You have been sentenced to shame. The walk back to the Browns' house is a blur of misery. Master Hawthorne walks beside you, a silent, grim-minus-faced guard. The rain has stopped, but the world feels even more grey and oppressive than before. Every shadow seems to hold a watching eye. Every gust of wind seems to whisper your shame. You are no longer just a person. You are a walking, breathing scandal, a sermon in minus progress. When you arrive at the house, Master Hawthorne gives you a final, stern look and a curt nod before turning to leave. His duty is done. For now, you push open the heavy door and step inside. The air in the small room is thick with an unspoken tension. Goodwife Brown is still there, methodically going about her afternoon chores, but she doesn't look up when you enter. The children, who might normally have greeted you, are quiet, huddled by the hearth as if sensing the storm that has broken over their home. The week that follows is the longest and most excruciating of your life. It is a week of silence. Goodwife Brown speaks to you only when absolutely necessary. In short, functional sentences. The fire needs wood. The water bucket is empty. There is no warmth, no conversation, no hint of the fleeting camaraderie you once thought you shared. You are a source of shame for her household, a lodger who has brought the minister's formal displeasure to her door. Her coldness is a wall, protecting her and her family from your contamination. The silence from the rest of the town is even more profound. When you are forced to go outside to the well, to the wood pile, the effect is immediate and devastating. People turn their backs as you approach. Conversations halt mid-sentence, resuming only after you have passed. If you catch someone's eye by accident, they look away quickly, as if your gaze might infect them. You are being socially erased, rendered invisible and untouchable. This practice, a form of communal shunning, was an incredibly powerful tool for enforcing conformity. It wasn't an official punishment handed down by a court, but it was just as effective. To be completely ignored, to have your existence denied by the very people you live with, is a unique and deeply painful form of psychological torment. It's the social equivalent of being buried alive. You eat your meals in silence, the scraping of spoons against wooden bowls unnaturally loud in the quiet room. You perform your chores with a frantic, desperate energy, as if trying to scrub away your sin with physical labor. But there is no escape. Every moment is filled with the dread of the coming Sunday. At night, sleep offers little respite. You lie on your straw pallet, the events replaying in your mind on an endless loop. You see the faces of the congregation, their eyes fixed on you. You try to form the words of your apology, but they catch in your throat. The shame is a physical thing, a heavy weight on your chest that makes it hard to breathe. This period of waiting was an intentional part of the punishment. It wasn't just about the final act of confession. It was about the agonizing anticipation. The minister wanted you to spend this time in sober reflection, and he has created the perfect conditions for it. With no social interaction, no distractions, you are left with nothing but your own thoughts and the crushing weight of your transgression. You are marinating in your own guilt. A strange historical debate revolves around this very concept. Did the Puritans experience emotions like embarrassment and shame in the same way we do? Some historians argue that in a society so focused on collective identity and divine judgment, shame was less a private, internal feeling and more a public, objective status. To be shamed was to be formally designated as out of line with the community's standards. It was a change in your social standing, not just a feeling. Others argue that the human experience of humiliation is universal, and the dread you're feeling is a timeless emotion, one that a 17th-century Puritan would understand perfectly. One afternoon, seeking a moment's escape, you wander to the edge of the settlement. Near the woods, you look out at the endless, dark sea of trees. The forest represents a different kind of world, one without rules, without judgment, without the constant, suffocating watchfulness of the town. The thought of just walking into it, of disappearing, is a fleeting, tempting fantasy. But you know it's a death sentence. To be alone in this wilderness is to be lost. Your survival, as much as you hate to admit it, is tied to the very community that is currently tormenting you. And so you turn back. You walk back toward the cluster of wooden houses, back toward the silence and the staring eyes. You have no choice but to face what is coming. The week crawls by, each day a new circle of a quiet, personal hell. Friday comes and goes. Saturday, the day of preparation for the Sabbath. is a blur of anxious activity. But then, you wake up on Sunday morning. The day of your reckoning has arrived. The bell is about to toll, and it is tolling for you. On Sunday morning, the atmosphere in the house is thick with a dreadful, formal gravity. You dressing your soberest, plainest clothes. Every rustle of the fabric sounds like a judgment. Good wife Brown, for the first time all week, speaks to you directly about the matter at hand. The minister sent word. She says, her back to you as she packs a small, cold lunch for the break between services. He will call you up after his sermon. You are to walk to the front and stand on the penitent's stool. The penitent's stool. You hadn't known about that detail. It's a small, backless wooden stool placed directly in front of the pulpit, lower than the minister, but elevated just enough to be seen by everyone. It's a piece of furniture with a single, humiliating purpose. She then places a small, folded piece of paper on the table. He also sent this. He said it might guide your thoughts. You pick it up with trembling fingers. You unfold it. It is a pre-minus written apology. The minister has composed your confession for you. The handwriting is neat, precise, and utterly impersonal. You read the words, I stand before you this day, a wretched and sinful creature, to confess my grievous fault. It goes on, a perfectly crafted piece of theological self-minus flagellation. It talks about the vanity of my mind, the idleness of my tongue, and the mischief sown by my uncharitable speech. It asks for forgiveness from God, the church, and from our godly minister and his virtuous wife, whom you had so grievously wronged with my careless and false reports. This was not an uncommon practice. For a public confession to be effective, it had to be the right kind of confession. It had to hit all the correct theological notes. It had to affirm the values of the community. A genuine, emotional, but theologically incorrect apology from the heart would not do. It might be sincere, but it wouldn't serve the larger purpose of restoring communal order. The goal wasn't just for you to feel sorry. It was for you to perform your sorrow in a way that reinforced the very rules you broke. By writing the script, the minister ensures the message is controlled. Your public humiliation will be a persecuted lesson for the entire congregation. You are not just apologizing. You are being used as a mouthpiece for the church's authority. This raises a fascinating question for historians of emotion and psychology. What is the nature of a forced apology? Can a person be brought to genuine repentance through a scripted confession? Or does it simply breed a deeper, more hidden resentment? The Puritan leadership clearly believed in the power of ritual and prescribed words to shape the inner person. They believed that by making you say the right things, they could actually help make you become the right kind of person. Modern psychology might have a different take on that. You feel a surge of rebellion. You don't want to say these words. They are not your words. They feel like a costume you are being forced to wear. Your crime was repeating a bit of gossip about a hat. This confession makes you sound like a villain from a morality play. But what choice do you have? To refuse would be an act of open defiance. It would prove the minister's point that your heart is hardened and would undoubtedly land you in the stocks or worse. You fold the paper and clutch it in your hand. It feels both like a lifeline and a lead weight. At least you won't have to invent the words yourself. But you will have to be the one to speak them, to give them voice, to own them in front of everyone. The church bell begins its solemn, inexorable tolling. It's time. Good wife Brown finishes her preparations and, without a word, heads for the door. You are to walk with her, as part of her household. It is a public display that, despite your sin, her family is still fulfilling its duty to bring you to worship. You take a deep breath and follow her out into the cold morning air. The walk to the meeting house is an agony of exposure. Every face you pass seems to know. You can feel their stares, a mixture of pity, scorn, and morbid curiosity. You are the day's main event, the lurid spectacle that will break the monotony of the long service. You enter the meeting house and take your usual seat on the hard bench. The room is already filling up. The air hums with a quiet, expectant energy. You sit with your back ramrod straight, your hands clutching the folded paper in your lap so tightly that your knuckles are white. You stare straight ahead at the imposing pulpit, avoiding the sea of eyes around you. The service is about to begin, and you know that every prayer, every soul, every word of the long sermon is just a prelude to the moment when you will be called to stand, to walk, and to perform your own shame. The service begins. The P-recenter lines out the first psalm, and the congregation's roar. Powerful voices fill the stark room. Normally, the sound is a unified wall of praise. Today, you feel utterly separate from it, as if you're re-listening from behind a thick wall of glass. You move your lips, but no sound comes out. You are here, but you are not one of them. Not yet. The minister ascends the high pulpit. He looks out over his flock, his gaze sweeping across the room before beginning his prayer. The prayer is long, as always, but today, it seems to have a particular focus. He prays for unity, for the healing of divisions, for the strength to resist the whispers of the slanderer and the temptations of a prideful heart. Every word feels aimed directly at you. Then comes the sermon. It's a marathon of theology and moral instruction, lasting well over 2 hours. The minister's text for the day is from the book of Proverbs. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. He dissects the verse with scholarly precision, his voice rising and falling in a hypnotic cadence. He speaks of the tongue as a tool, one that can be used to build up the house of God with words of truth and encouragement, or to tear it down with the fire of gossip and lies. He tells stories from the Bible, of people brought low by their own words. He speaks of the responsibility that comes with speech, the sacred duty to be charitable and truthful. He is not just delivering a sermon. He is laying the final groundwork for your public appearance. He is reminding every person in the room of the gravity of your sin, ensuring that when you stand before them, they will understand the full weight of the moment. You are frozen on the hard bench, the minister's words washing over you. The room is cold, but sweat trickles down your back. Your hands are icy, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. The folded paper in your lap feels impossibly heavy. Every minute that passes is another minute closer to the moment of reckoning. You look around at the faces of the congregation. They are rapt, their attention fixed on the minister. Men, women, children all sit in disciplined silence, absorbing the lesson. You wonder what they are thinking. Are they thinking about their own moments of careless speech? Are they feeling a sense of moral superiority? Or are they just grateful that it is you, and not them, who will be called to account today? This public nature of Puritan life is something historians still grapple with. Did it create a more moral society, or simply a more anxious and performative one? When your spiritual life is a matter of public record, does piety become a strategy for survival rather than a genuine expression of faith? Looking at the sea of stern, unreadable faces, it's impossible to know. Finally, after what feels like a lifetime, the sermon concludes. The minister closes his Bible, but he does not descend from the pulpit. I do. Profound silence falls over the meeting house. This is it. The air is so still, you can hear the faint whisper of the wind against the window panes. Then now, the minister's voice booms in the quiet room. We must attend to a matter of sorrow and of restoration. He looks directly at you. For the first time, he says your name in front of the entire congregation. I call upon you to come forward and make your confession before God and this church. Time seems to slow down. The silence stretches, becoming a physical pressure. Every single person in the room turns to look at you. It is a wave of collective focus, so intense it feels like a physical blow. You cannot breathe. You are pinned in place by 100 pairs of eyes. Goodwife Brown, sitting beside you, gives you a slight, almost imperceptible nudge. It's not a gesture of support. Let an order go. Somehow, you force your legs to move. You stand up. The rustle of your clothes is deafening in the silence. You place one foot in front of the other, your body moving on some kind of primitive autopilot. The walk from your bench to the front of the meeting house is the longest, most terrifying journey of your life. The wooden floorboards creak under your feet, each sound an announcement of your shame. You are aware of everything. The way the light from the windows illuminates, the dust motes dancing in the air. The stern face of Master Hawthorne, the tithing man, standing near the front. The curious, unblinking stares of the children on the front benches. You reach the front of the room. There it is, the penitent stool, small, simple, and impossibly intimidate. You turn your back to the minister and face the congregation. You force yourself to look up, to see the field of faces watching you. There is no sympathy there, only expectation. You sit down on the stool. The wood is hard and cold. You are now officially on display, the sole actor on a very public stage. You unfold the piece of paper with trembling hands. The words swim before your eyes. You take a ragged, shaky breath. You are about to speak. You clear your throat, a small, dry sound that seems to echo in the vast silence. Your hands are shaking so much that the paper rattles. You grip it tighter, forcing yourself to focus on the neat, precise script. You have to read the words. It is the only way through this. I stand before you this day. You begin, your voice a choked whisper. It's barely audible. From the pulpit behind you, the minister's voice cuts through the silence, firm but not unkind. Speak up, so that all may hear your repentance. You take another shaky breath, summoning every ounce of will you possess. You lift your chin and start again, your voice louder this time, though it trembles like a plucked string. I stand before you this day, a wretched and sinful creature, to confess my grievous fault. You read the words exactly as they are written. You call your own mind vain, your tongue idle, your speech uncharitable. With every word, you feel a piece of your pride, your very self, being flayed away. You are publicly dissecting your own character, using the minister's scalpel. The congregation listens in absolute, unnerving stillness. No one coughs, no one shuffles their feet. Their collective attention is a laser beam, and you are its focal point. You don't dare to look at their faces directly, but you can feel their eyes on you, scrutinizing your every word, your every tremor. They are judging the quality of your performance. Is your shame deep enough? Is your repentance sincere? As you continue, you come to the part of the confession that names the minister and his wife. And I do humbly ask the forgiveness of our godly minister and his virtuous wife, whom I have so grievously wronged with my careless and false reports. And this, you instinctively glance toward the minister's wife, who is sitting in a place of honor near the front. Her face is a mask of serene composure. She gives a slight, almost regal nod, a public performance of her own piety and forgiveness. It's a gesture that both absolves you and reinforces her own superior moral standing. This moment highlights a fascinating, uncomplex aspect of these rituals. While the focus is on your shame, it is also a powerful reaffirmation of the status of the person who was wronged. Your public abasement elevates them. The ritual simultaneously lowers you and raises the authority figures you challenge, neatly restoring the social equilibrium you disrupted. You continue reading, your voice gaining a strange, detached rhythm. It's as if someone else is speaking these words. You are merely a vessel for this pre-ordained act of contrition. I have allowed Satan to use my tongue as an instrument of discord, and I have brought shame upon this house of God and upon myself. Here's a small but significant detail from the historical records of such confessions. They were often unofficially recorded in the church or town logs. Your shame wasn't just a fleeting moment of embarrassment. It was becoming a part of the permanent, written history of the community. Future generations could read out your sin. This added another layer of gravity to the proceedings. Your apology was not just for the people in the room, but for posterity. Finally, you reached the last line. I threw myself upon the mercy of God and upon the charity of this congregation, and I promise to set a guard upon my lips from this day forward. You finish speaking. The last word hangs in the air, and then the silence rushes back in, heavier and more profound than before. It is a waiting silence, a judging silence. It is far more powerful than any shouting or jeering could ever be. In a culture that valued order and quiet contemplation, this collective quiet is the ultimate expression of communal judgment. You sit there on the stool, the now minus useless paper clutched in your hand, your head bowed. You have done what was required. The next move is theirs. The minister lets the silence stretch for a long, agonizing moment. Then, his voice fills the room again. If this confession be sincere, as we pray it is, then it is our Christian duty to forgive. As God offers grace to the penitent sinner, so must we offer charity to our sister who has stumbled. Let this be a lesson to us all on the power of the tongue and the importance of unity. He begins a final prayer, a prayer for your soul and for the restored health of the community. It is the signal that the ritual is over. You have been verbally chastised, publicly shamed, and then, conditionally, welcomed back. He says, Amen. The congregation murmurs, Amen. It is finished. You are allowed to stand and walk back to your seat. The journey back feels entirely different from the walk to the front. The eyes that follow you now are not just filled with judgment, but with something else, a kind of final, clinical assessment. You have taken your medicine. The fever has, theoretically, broken. You slide onto the bench, your body trembling with a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and a deep, hollowed out emptiness. You have confessed your shame. You have been forgiven. But the memory of this day, of standing alone before the silent, watching eyes of the entire world, will be a part of you forever. The rest of the Sunday service passes in a fog. There's the short break for a cold lunch, eaten in the chilly air outside the meeting house, and then the long afternoon service. But for you, the day is already over. You are hollowed out, exhausted by the emotional and psychological ordeal. During the break, something remarkable happens. Prudence, the young woman who had also been at the well, approaches you. She, too, had to make a confession, though a shorter one, after yours. Her eyes are rimmed, her face pale. She doesn't say anything. She just hands you a small piece of her bread. It is a tiny gesture. But in the context of the last week of total isolation, it is monumental. It is a signal. The shunning is over. When you return to the Browns' house that evening, the oppressive silence is gone. It's replaced by a careful, almost fragile normalcy. Goodwife Brown speaks to you about the next day's chores. Goodman Brown asks you to pass the salt. They are small, mundane interactions, that they are a form of acceptance. You have paid your debt to the community, and you are being slowly, cautiously readmitted into the fold of human interaction. In the days that follow, you begin to understand the strange power of the punishment you endured. It was humiliating. Yes, it was psychologically brutal, but it was also, in its own way, incredibly effective. It worked. The rumor about the minister and his wife is dead. No one speaks of it. To do so now would be to defy the public ritual of closure that everyone witnessed. The confession acted as a full stop, a definitive end to the narrative. You also notice a change in your own status. You are no longer the source of a scandal. Your sin has been identified, confessed, and publicly absolved. In a strange way, you are now cleaner than those whose minor, unconfessed sins still fester in private. You have been through the fire and have come out the other side. People no longer avoid you. They meet your gaze. They offer quiet good mornings. You have been successfully reintegrated. This is the genius of the system. From the Puritan perspective, the goal was not to create a permanent class of outcasts. A functioning community needed all its members. The ritual of public confession, as painful as it was a mechanism for restoration. It provided a clear, albeit difficult, pathway for an offender to return to full membership in the society. It upheld the rules while ultimately preserving the integrity of the group. This leads to one of the great, ongoing debates among historians of crime and punishment. Is this model of restorative justice in some ways more advanced than a purely punitive system that simply warehouses offenders, isolating them from society? The Puritans' methods were coercive and psychologically harsh, certainly, but their ultimate goal of mending the community fabric is a concept that modern legal systems are still exploring and struggling with. Was this embarrassing punishment, in its own strange way, a more sophisticated tool for social cohesion than simple imprisonment? You find yourself reflecting on the nature of your crime. What started as a moment of boredom and a desire for connection spiraled into a community-wide crisis. You learned that in this tightly woven world, there is no such thing as a harmless secret or an idle word. Every syllable has weight. You have been forcibly taught the most important lesson of this society. The group is more important than the individual. The we always outweighs the I. You look back on the experience, the shame, the fear, the utter humiliation. It was an ordeal you would not wish on your worst enemy. And yet, you survived it. You are still here. You are still a part of the town. You have a place. It's a place you had to earn through a painful public performance, but it is a place nonetheless. The invisible fences that line this society, the ones you stumbled into so carelessly, are now crystal clear to you. You understand the boundaries. You know the rules. You've been given a fresh start, of a sort, but it's a start that comes with a permanent scar. You will forever be the woman who had to confess before the congregation. It will always be a part of your story, a part of your identity in this town. The forgiveness of the community is real, but its memory